The wind howled across the desolate landscape, carrying with it the bitter chill of an unforgiving winter. Emily gripped the steering wheel of her car tightly, the tires skidding as she maneuvered along the icy roads. The snowflakes danced around her headlights, creating a white blur that seemed to swallow the road ahead. She had been driving for what felt like hours, but the storm was relentless, making each mile a struggle. Her thoughts wandered, her mind occupied by the warmth of her home, the glow of the fireplace, and the promise of a quiet evening. Yet, the storm had other plans, and Emily had no choice but to continue her journey through the unforgiving weather. Suddenly, something unusual caught her eye. Amidst the snow, she spotted a faint figure, something that shouldn't have been there in the middle of the track. Slamming on the brakes, her car skidded to a stop, the headlights illuminating the figure ahead. A German shepherd, barely visible under layers of snow, was lying on the railway tracks. His fur was matted with ice, his body rigid and still. Emily's heart stopped for a moment. She had read about similar stories before, but never imagined she would find herself in one. The dog was chained to the tracks, the cold metal links biting into his skin. Without a second thought, Emily threw open the door and dashed toward the animal. Her boots crunched loudly in the snow, the sound muffled by the howling wind. The dog's eyes were wide open, glazed with exhaustion and fear. His breathing was shallow, and Emily could see that he was barely clinging to life. "Hey, boy," she whispered, kneeling beside him. The dog didn't move, his gaze empty, as if he had already accepted his fate. She could feel the ice in the air, but the pain in her chest was sharper than the cold. She gently touched the chains around his neck, but they were rusted and stuck. The dog flinched, his body jerking slightly, but he couldn't muster the strength to move further. Emily's fingers trembled as she tried to pry the chains free, but the metal was frozen and unyielding. Time was running out. A train could be coming any moment. Emily's thoughts raced. She couldn't just leave him here. This dog deserved a chance to feel warmth, to feel love again. Without hesitation, Emily ran back to her car and grabbed the emergency tools from the trunk. She returned quickly, determined to save the dog no matter the cost. With each second that passed, the train seemed closer, its distant whistle growing louder. She worked tirelessly, her fingers numb with the cold, as she finally managed to break the chains free. The dog's neck was raw from the metal, but Emily didn't stop. She gently lifted him into her arms, feeling his fragile body against her chest. He was light, almost weightless, as if he had already given up on life. "Come on, Rex," she whispered softly, as she read the name engraved on the collar around his neck. "You're not alone anymore. You're going to be okay." The snow continued to fall in thick sheets, but Emily couldn't afford to stop now. She knew that the train was coming closer, but there was no way she would leave Rex behind. The storm, the cold, the train, it didn't matter. She would save him no matter what it took. And so, with Rex in her arms, Emily began to run. Toward safety, toward life, and toward the hope that even in the darkest moments, love could save them both. Emily's breath came out in visible puffs as she ran, her body protesting the cold, but her resolve unwavering. Rex, though weak, rested in her arms, his body shivering uncontrollably. She had no idea how long he had been chained to those tracks, but the state he was in made her stomach turn. His ribs were visible, his fur matted with dirt and snow, and his eyes were clouded with pain and fear. Still, there was life in him, faint but present, and Emily wasn't about to let it go out. The distant sound of the train grew louder, each whistle a painful reminder of how much time they didn't have. Emily pushed herself harder, her legs burning as she sprinted through the snow-covered landscape. Rex's body felt lighter as the adrenaline coursed through her veins, but the realization of the danger they were in didn't escape her. She couldn't risk running too far. She needed to get to a safe place, somewhere where she could get him help. The train was close now. Emily could see the lights in the distance, cutting through the storm like a massive beast charging toward them. She glanced around frantically, searching for any sign of shelter or a place to hide. but the open, barren fields stretched out for miles. Nothing but snow, ice, and the relentless approaching train. Then, through the falling snow, she spotted a small building in the distance. It was old, abandoned, perhaps once a service station or a shelter for the railway workers. She pushed herself even harder, praying it was still standing and accessible. Her heart raced as she neared the structure, her body beginning to tremble from the cold, but she didn't slow down. The train was only moments away from barreling through the tracks, and she couldn't risk being caught in the open. Reaching the building's entrance, Emily pushed the door open with her shoulder, stumbling inside. The air was damp and smelled of mildew, but it was shelter, a temporary refuge from the storm. She quickly found a corner and gently laid Rex down, her hands shaking as she checked his condition. His breathing was shallow, his eyes unfocused as he whimpered softly, a sound so weak that it made Emily's heart ache. She ran to the old wooden counter, searching through drawers for anything that could help. There was nothing useful, just remnants of a forgotten time. But Emily didn't give up. She turned to Rex, whispering words of comfort even though she knew he couldn't understand. "Hold on, Rex. I'm going to help you. I promise." Emily grabbed her phone from her pocket and dialed the nearest veterinary clinic. Her fingers trembled as she spoke to the receptionist, explaining the situation, but the line was filled with static and interference. The storm was clearly wreaking havoc on communication lines. The urgency in her voice rose as she begged for help. "Please, I need someone to come. I have a dog. He's in bad shape. He's been abandoned." The connection dropped. Emily cursed under her breath, frustrated and desperate. She didn't have the luxury of time to wait for help that might not come. She needed to act now. She rushed to Rex, kneeling beside him, her hands gently feeling his body for any signs of injury. His ribs were bruised from the chain, and his coat was thin, but the worst was his right hind leg. It was swollen and bent at an unnatural angle. The train had passed, its deafening roar fading into the distance, but Emily wasn't sure how much longer she could keep going like this. She needed to get Rex to a vet immediately. His life was in the balance, and she could feel it slipping away with each passing minute. She remembered the old station's small first aid kit, tucked away behind a dusty shelf. There were only basic supplies: bandages, antiseptic, a pair of scissors. She worked quickly, trying to stabilize Rex's leg as best she could. Her hands were cold, the numbness creeping up her fingers, but she refused to stop. Rex whimpered again, his eyes flickering open. Emily smiled through her tears, speaking softly to him. "You're not alone, Rex. You're going to be okay." Her eyes glanced at the door, and she realized something that made her heart freeze. She couldn't stay in this abandoned building forever. Rex needed proper medical care, and the storm was only getting worse. Emily had no choice but to risk driving in the snowstorm again, hoping she could make it to the nearest clinic before it was too late. But as she turned to lift him again, she noticed something strange. A small tag on his collar that she hadn't seen before. She gently pulled it free and read the name on it. Rex. There was no other information, just his name. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Rex had been abandoned deliberately, left to suffer and die alone. The anger bubbled up inside her, a fire she couldn't contain. Whoever had done this to him would never know peace again. But there was no time to focus on that now. There was only one thing she could do: keep fighting for Rex, just as he had fought to stay alive. Emily stood up, determination etched on her face. "We're not done yet, Rex. We're getting you out of here. Hang on." The storm continued to rage outside the small station, but Emily was undeterred. The warmth of her resolve felt like a shield against the biting cold, even as her body trembled with exhaustion. She had to get Rex to safety, to a place where he could heal. His suffering was too much for her to bear, and she wasn't about to let him die after everything he had already endured. With gentle care, she lifted Rex into her arms once more, holding him close as she stepped back into the howling wind. His body was heavy now, but she didn't let that stop her. She had no idea how much strength he had left, but she could feel his heartbeat, a weak but steady rhythm against her chest, and it gave her the will to move forward. The car was parked not far from the station, and though Emily's hands were stiff from the cold, she opened the door and laid Rex carefully on the passenger seat, covering him with the blanket she kept in the back. She knew the drive would be dangerous. The snow had turned the roads into a slick, unrecognizable mess. But she had no other choice. The nearest vet was at least 20 miles away, and time was running out for Rex. She started the engine, the sound of it a welcome relief against the howling wind, and slowly pulled onto the road. The snowstorm made the journey treacherous, the visibility so poor that Emily had to drive at a crawl. Every bump in the road felt like a jolt to her heart, but she kept her eyes on the path ahead, determined to reach their destination. As she drove, Emily couldn't stop thinking about Rex's past. Whoever had done this to him, left him chained to the tracks, abandoned to die, didn't deserve to live. The cruelty of it made her blood boil. But Rex wasn't just some dog left to fend for himself. He was a survivor. Even now, his breathing was steady, and his eyes, though clouded with exhaustion, still flickered with the faintest glimmer of hope. "I'm so sorry," she whispered as she glanced over at him, her heart breaking. "I wish I could have gotten to you sooner." The miles seemed to stretch on forever, and with every passing minute, Emily's concern for Rex deepened. The poor animal was in no condition to survive much longer without medical attention. Her mind raced as she thought of the best way to get him the care he needed. What if the clinic wasn't open? What if it was too late? But as they rounded a curve, a small building came into view. A vet clinic, its neon sign flickering weakly through the snow. Emily's heart leapt in her chest. She could make it. They could make it. She pushed the pedal to the floor, praying that the clinic would still be open, that someone would be there to help Rex. As she skidded into the parking lot, Emily slammed the car into park and rushed to Rex's side. Her breath came out in short bursts, the cold air stinging her lungs, but she didn't care. She couldn't afford to waste another second. She opened the passenger door and gently lifted him into her arms once again, carrying him toward the clinic's entrance. She knocked frantically on the door, her eyes wild with desperation. After what felt like an eternity, the door finally creaked open, and a young woman in a vet coat stepped out. Her eyes widened at the sight of Rex, his frail body shivering uncontrollably in Emily's arms. "What happened?" the vet asked, immediately springing into action. "I found him on the tracks," Emily panted. "He's been chained there, left to die. Please, you have to help him." The vet nodded without hesitation, her face set with a determination that matched Emily's. "Get him inside. We'll take care of him." Emily followed the vet into the clinic, her arms trembling as she handed Rex over. The vet quickly placed him on an examination table, the sterile scent of the clinic filling the air as she worked efficiently, her hands moving with practiced ease. She checked Rex's pulse, his breathing, and gently manipulated his leg, which was now clearly fractured. The vet's face was grim, but she didn't speak. Instead, she turned to Emily. "Whoever did this to him," the vet said softly, "left him to die. His body is freezing, and he's severely malnourished. But it's not too late. He's a fighter." Emily felt a flood of relief wash over her, but it was tinged with anger. How could anyone do this to a helpless animal? How could they leave Rex in such a state, a life worth saving discarded like trash? "He's going to need some fluids and pain management," the vet continued, "and I'll need to set his leg, but he has a good chance. We'll do everything we can for him." Emily nodded, unable to speak for fear of breaking down. She watched the vet carefully administer and begin to work on Rex's leg, her hands trembling. The storm raged on outside, but inside, there was a quiet hope, a hope that Rex would make it through this. As the vet worked, Emily stood by, her thoughts drifting back to the moment she had found Rex chained to the tracks. She knew now that she couldn't just walk away from this. She had to do more than help him survive. She had to give him a home, a life filled with love and care, a life that would make up for all the pain he had endured. When the vet finished, she turned to Emily, her expression softening. "He's stable for now. He's going to need a lot of care and attention, but I think he's going to make it." Emily's heart swelled with relief. Thank you so much. The vet smiled gently. He's lucky you found him. And as Emily looked down at Rex, his breathing steady now, his body beginning to relax in the warmth of the clinic, she knew without a doubt that she couldn't let him go. He wasn't just a dog she had saved. He was part of her life now, and she would fight for him just as fiercely as he had fought for his own survival. Days passed in a blur of hospital visits, medical procedures, and tender care. Rex, though weak, was a testament to resilience. Emily visited him every day, never leaving his side for too long. The vet clinic had become a second home to her, its sterile walls filled with the hope of healing, not just for Rex but for herself too. Every day his strength seemed to return, slowly but steadily. His leg had been set, and while it would take time to heal completely, there was no longer any doubt. He was going to survive. Emily found herself more and more drawn to him. The bond they had formed in those harrowing moments on the railway tracks had only deepened in the quiet hours spent in the clinic. Rex had fought so hard to stay alive, and Emily had promised him that she would be there for him. Now, as she sat beside his cage, stroking his soft fur, that promise felt more sacred than ever. The vet, Dr. Ramirez, had been astonished at how quickly Rex was recovering. He was eating, his weight slowly returning to normal, and the once lifeless eyes now shone with an undeniable spark of life. Still, he had a long way to go, but Dr. Ramirez was optimistic. "He's stronger than he looks," Dr. Ramirez said one morning as she watched Emily gently coax Rex to take another bite of food. "This boy has a lot of fight in him, and so do you." Emily smiled softly, her heart full of gratitude for the vet's words. She could feel that same fight, the quiet determination, in herself. She had come into this rescue with only the hope that Rex would survive. But now there was a new goal, a new promise to make. She was going to give him a home. She was going to make sure that he never knew pain or loneliness again. One evening, after Rex had taken his last dose of medicine for the day, Dr. Ramirez looked at Emily with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she began, "I've seen a lot of animals come through here, but there's something special about Rex. He's been through so much, and he's come out of it with so much love to give. If you decide to adopt him, I think he'll make an incredible companion. He just needs someone to trust." Emily's heart swelled at the thought. She already knew what her decision was. It had been there from the moment she'd found him, cold and alone on the tracks. Rex had already been through so much, and yet he still had so much love to give. And she, too, had so much to offer him. "I want to adopt him," Emily said without hesitation. "I can't leave him behind. He's mine now. He's my family." Dr. Ramirez smiled warmly. "I thought you might say that. I'll help you with the paperwork. Rex will have a home where he can heal fully, and you'll have a friend for life." It was a simple exchange, but to Emily, it felt like the beginning of everything. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew one thing for sure. Rex would be there, by her side, every step of the way. As the days went on, Rex's condition continued to improve. He was walking with a limp, but the signs of pain were slowly fading. His coat had regained some of its shine, and his eyes sparkled with the joy of being loved. The once cold and distant dog who had been left to die on the tracks was now a companion, loyal, gentle, and full of gratitude. One afternoon, Emily arrived at the clinic, ready to bring Rex home. The staff had prepared everything for his departure, and as she walked into the room where he was waiting, she was greeted with a joyful bark. Rex wagged his tail weakly but with undeniable happiness. His eyes met hers, and in that moment the world outside, the snowstorm, the cruelty of his past, didn't matter. All that mattered was that they had made it through, together. The paperwork was finalized, and Emily gently placed Rex in the back seat of her car. He looked at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and trust, as if wondering where they were going, what new life awaited them. Emily smiled at him, reaching back to pat his head. "You're home now, Rex," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "You're home." The drive back to her house felt surreal. The journey that had begun with a desperate rescue now felt like the start of something beautiful. Emily couldn't stop glancing at Rex in the rearview mirror, her heart filled with a warmth that could rival the fire in her living room. When they finally arrived at her home, Emily led him inside. The house, once quiet and empty, now felt full of hope, full of love, full of possibility. Rex sniffed around, his tail wagging hesitantly as he explored his new environment. Emily knelt down beside him, offering him the comfort of her touch. "We're going to take it slow," Emily said, her voice gentle. "But this is your home now. You're safe here. You're loved." And with that, the final chapter of Rex's painful past began to fade away. The future was uncertain, but Emily had made a vow to him. She would be his protector, his companion, and his family. Together, they would heal from the scars of the past, building a life filled with trust, love, and the understanding that they had both fought for a future worth living. As Rex curled up on his new bed, Emily sat beside him, her heart full. The storm outside had passed, and in its place, there was only peace. The days that followed were filled with small victories. Emily's home became Rex's sanctuary, a place where he could finally let go of the fear that had haunted him for so long. The once cold and distant dog who had been left to die on the railway tracks was now a playful, gentle companion. Each day he grew stronger, more confident in his new life. Emily watched it all unfold with a mixture of joy and disbelief. Every morning, she would wake to find Rex at her side, his warm presence a comforting reminder that they had both made it through the storm. His tail wagged eagerly when he saw her, as if to say, "We're in this together now." And together they were. The scar on his leg remained, a permanent reminder of his past, but it didn't slow him down. He loved to run around the yard, chasing after sticks and sniffing every corner of their property, his energy contagious. Emily often laughed at his antics, her heart light with the knowledge that he was finally free to be the dog he was always meant to be. But it wasn't just Rex who had healed. Emily, too, found herself changed by this unexpected journey. The compassion, the determination, the love she had poured into saving him had transformed her. It was as if Rex had given her a new purpose, a reason to embrace life with the same fierce loyalty he had shown during his darkest days. One chilly afternoon, as they walked together through the park near her home, Emily looked down at Rex. He was walking beside her, his head held high, and for a moment, she saw the spark of joy that had been so absent in the dog she had found on the tracks. The dog who had been given up on, who had been left to die, now had a future. A bright, hopeful future filled with love and care. Rex had proven to her that love was a healing force, one that transcended the wounds of the past. He had fought for his life with a strength that surprised even him, and Emily had been there every step of the way, offering him the one thing he had lacked, unwavering love. As the weeks passed, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how their lives had intertwined. She had rescued Rex, yes, but in doing so, he had rescued her too. The darkness of the past, the sadness that had once filled her life, had faded into something beautiful and light. Rex had brought her joy, and she had given him hope. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Rex resting his head on her lap, Emily smiled softly, her fingers gently stroking his fur. She thought back to the moment she had first found him, chained and alone, ready to give up. But she hadn't given up on him. She had fought for him when no one else would. And now, as she looked down at the dog who had become her family, she knew that every moment of struggle had been worth it. "I'm so glad I found you, Rex," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "You've changed my life, just like I promised I would change yours." Rex raised his head at the sound of her voice, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. He nuzzled against her hand, his way of saying, "I'm here and I'm yours." And in that moment, Emily knew, without a doubt, that no matter what happened in the future, they would face it together. She would never leave him. Not now, not ever. The world outside was still cold and uncertain. But inside, in that little house filled with warmth and love, there was nothing but peace. Rex had found his place, and so had she. Their bond, forged in the fire of survival, was unbreakable, and together, they would face whatever came next with courage, love, and the certainty that they were a family. A family that would never give up on each other. As the night settled around them, Emily curled up on the couch, Rex at her side, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at home. Safe, complete. And so, their story continued. One of courage, redemption, and a love that would last forever.